the lens in your camera has a focal length, it has an aperture, it has a lot of this. Oh, it's beeping. Oh, should probably have turned it off before I started this video. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lauren, I'm a food photographer and I love sharing all my best food photography tips and tutorials. So if you're into that, hit that subscribe button and let's get into today's video. So I spend a lot of time talking about cameras and DSLRs and lenses and all that kind of stuff. But today I want to strip it back, keep it simple and talk to you about smartphone photography. Now, I've heard the phrase, the best camera is the one you have on you so many times, and I'm pretty sure every single food photographer or any kind of photographer has. But the reality is these days, with the quality of cameras in smartphones, the camera you have with you might actually be the best camera you have. So I'm going to be talking you through how I take photos on my phone, the kind of shots that they work for, the kind of shots they don't work for, and how you can get the best results for your food photography using your phone. So the first key point in order to be successful with your smartphone food photography is to understand what it is you're working with. So when you're choosing a DSLR and you're choosing a lens, you're going to choose a lens based on the kind of photo you want to take, so you know how it's going to look. So when you're working with your smartphone, you should be aware of the same thing so that you know what it is you're working with and what kind of shots are going to work for it. So I have my iPhone 7 here and I'm going to talk you through what this camera phone is made up of, but I'm also going to tell you a little bit about the difference in the iPhone 7 Plus and the 8 and the X and all that kind of thing. I'm just not fancy enough to have an iPhone X. So the iPhone 7 has one camera inside with one lens and it is a focal length of 28mm. So that's pretty wide angle and that's going to influence a lot of the kind of shots that you can and cannot take really with this camera. It also has a fixed aperture of f1.8 and the ability to zoom in digitally up to 5 times. Now, the thing with digital zoom is it's not real focal length zoom, it's only kind of artificially blowing up your photo on the screen. So if you use that, you're going to be getting a sort of a less and less high quality photo. So I don't really recommend using the zoom feature when you're trying to take food photos on your phone. Now, the iPhone 7 Plus and I think the iPhone 8 and the iPhone X have two lenses. So they have the 28mm and then they also have a 56mm. So when you use the zoom feature on those phones, you have a little bit more flexibility because they're zooming optically, so it gives you a few more options. However, 56mm is still pretty wide, and most of the time you're going to be working with the 28mm lens. So generally for food photography, I think when you're using your phone, it lends itself best to those top-down flat lay photos. And that's because we're trying to capture a wide area and you're not going to get any of that sort of fishbowling and warping that you're going to get if you try and take a head-on shot with your phone. Now, one of the most important things when you're shooting with your smartphone is to make sure that you're working with a good light source. This can be natural or artificial, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that the light is really bright enough to capture everything that you want. So what you don't have when you're shooting with your phone is the ability to change your shutter speed, your ISO, like all of those little details that allow you to compensate for maybe not optimum light. So you really need to make sure that the light you're working with is a really good quality source. So today I'm going to be working with natural light. I'm working with a north-facing window with a diffuser. A diffuser is a really great piece of equipment to have just to make sure you don't have any of that direct sunlight going on. So the app that I'm going to be using for shooting today is Adobe Lightroom for mobile. Now this is a completely free app. It does have some features that you can pay for, but we're just going to be using all the free features today. And the reason I like using this app rather than just the inbuilt camera app on the phone is it gives you a bit more flexibility with the settings and it kind of allows you to change things sort of like shutter speed and ISO to make sure that your photo is coming out exactly how you want it to. And then we're also going to jump into editing the photo, also in the Lightroom app. So I'm going to take you through that as well. Now we are in the middle of a ginormous heat wave in Europe. It is like 35 degrees Celsius outside and I'm melting, so I'm really not cooking anything today. So we're just gonna do a grilled peach salad because the griddle pan is all I can cope with today in terms of heat. So let's jump into the shoot. Okay, so when you open up Lightroom Mobile and you click to the camera, this is what you're going to see. So the very first thing that you want to do is make sure that here you are on the professional mode. And what this is going to do is give you quite a few more settings. It's going to allow you to turn your phone into kind of like a mini manual mode. So that's kind of fun. Okay, so going through the settings, the first thing that you're going to want to do is turn your flash off. So we are shooting with natural light today. As you can see, we've got the diffuser set up by the window. So we don't want any kind of like camera flash interfering with the image. It's going to make it look pretty washed out and just not that great. The next thing is the file format. So this is the difference between a JPEG file and a RAW file. So DNG is Adobe's version of RAW. You want to make sure that you are definitely shooting in DNG or RAW mode because you're going to end up with a picture that gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to editing. Okay, so on to the next thing. So now, really what we're going to do is kind of jump into the camera settings that we're going to use for taking this photo. And these are going to depend on the light source you're shooting with, how much light you have available, all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to give you a quick run through of how you want to set your settings. So first of all, there's a few handy little settings. If you click on the three dots here, what you're going to see is you get these extra options. So the first one where it says 3:2, this is the aspect ratio. So this is going to allow you to change which aspect ratio you shoot your photo in. So for 16:9, this is what you would want to use for an Instagram story. 3:2 is pretty much the standard one that I leave it on. And then you've got a couple of others as well, including 1:1 if you want to shoot a square. So I'm going to leave that on 3:2. You also have the option to set a self timer if you wanted to set up your camera, press the shutter and then go do something sort of in your photo. So we're not going to be using that today. This one is one of the most useful things I think that this app offers. So this allows you to have 3 different types of grid lines up on your photo. So you have the option between dividing your photo into 4, into the rule of thirds grid, and also the golden ratio grid as well. And then this little thing on the end is like your spirit level. So you can see as you turn, it tells you when your camera is straight, and that's really, really useful for when you're shooting straight on shots. So we're going to leave this on the rule of thirds grid today with the spirit level. Now, something that I really like to do with my photos, and I've mentioned this before, is to plan out my compositions before I start shooting my photo. So I'm going to leave a link down below to my free composition planning guides, which you can download and print, and then you can plan all of your photos. And then when you're shooting on Adobe Lightroom Mobile, you can set up your grid lines on your screen and really match up what you've planned out with what you're actually shooting. Okay, so the next thing is this triangle in the top. So if you turn this on, what it's going to do is it's going to show you any areas of your photo where you have clipped highlights. So this is quite extreme, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. It's going to make the area go stripy. So then as you adjust your exposure, you can make sure that you don't have any clipped highlights. So that's pretty handy. Okay, and now on to the settings, which are kind of going to emulate manual mode on a DSLR. So if you're not super familiar with manual mode, or you haven't really dived into that world yet, then I'm going to leave a link below to my free 5-day e-course, Manual Mode Essentials, which is going to get you up to speed on your camera and shooting like a pro in just 5 days. So make sure you check out that link, and then let's hop into how we're going to translate this onto our smartphone. Okay, so first thing that I want to do is, I know that this camera has a fixed aperture, so I can't change that. It's just going to be f1.8 all the time. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set my ISO to 100 because that is a nice value that's not going to give me any graininess. And what I notice now is that my photo is looking pretty dark. So because I have set my ISO so low, I need to slow down my shutter so that it's going to let in a bit more light. So right now it's on 1/1600th of a second, which is pretty extreme. Definitely don't need it to be quite that fast. So as you can see, just as I put it to 1/125th of a second, I start to get a few clipped highlights. So I'm just going to go back a little bit just to 1/160th. So there we go, we have a nicely exposed photo. Now there are a couple of extra settings. The first one is white balance. So just like on your DSLR, Lightroom for mobile is going to give you a lot of different white balance options that you can just pick. So you've got all the standard ones like auto, tungsten, fluorescent, daylight, cloudy. So you can just go ahead and choose the one that works best depending on what kind of light you're shooting in. But what I do like about this particularly is that it does give you the option to set a custom white balance. Now, if you don't know how to do this, you haven't done this before, then check out this video. I hope I'm pointing on the right side. Check out this video where I show you exactly how to set a custom white balance. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do here. So I'll just show you really quickly how we're going to do that. So I've grabbed my white balance card and I'm just going to pop this in my scene where the light is also hitting my subject. And then I'm going to come onto my phone, go back to white balance, choose this dropper tool, and then I'm going to go all the way in to fill the square that it gives me with my white balance card, and then press the tick. And that's it. So now I've set my custom white balance based on the light that I'm shooting in. So the last thing to do is the focus. Now that is this little auto button with the plus in it. And here you can select how much of your photo you want in focus. Now this green feature is kind of doing what focus peaking is called on a DSLR. So wherever it's bright green, that's the area that is in focus. So what you want to do is make sure that the very top of your subject is in focus, because that is what we're going to see in this flat lay. So I'm just going to make sure that is all lined up, and then I'm going to take my photo. And then you get your photo. So if I go back to my photos here, I can see the most recent one I took, and this is my photo. I can have a good zoom in, have a look around, make sure that everything's looking how I want it to look. It's looking pretty good to me. So I am going to go ahead and edit this. So I'm just going to select my photo from the list. There we go. And then let's jump into the edit. So you pretty much have all of the general editing features here that you have in a lot of other apps, and it's pretty easy to use. So we're going to start with hopping into light. Now I'm actually pretty happy with the exposure overall of this photo. So I think I'm just going to open up the curve, and then what you'll see here is you get this curve that comes up, and then I'm going to click to add 3 points, one on in the middle and then one where each of the two lines intersect. And then I'm just going to create a little bit of an S curve by boosting the highlights just a little bit and then dipping the shadows a little bit as well. So nothing too crazy, just adding in that little bit of contrast. I think that's actually a bit too much on the highlights, so I'm just going to bring that down. And then with the mid-tones, I'm just going to bring those up a little bit as well, just to help those salad bowls really stand out. Okay, so then I'm going to click done. I'm going to bring the general highlights down a bit just to make sure we haven't got anything too bright. I'm going to lift the shadows. Then I'm going to boost the whites a little bit, just a tiny bit. And then I'm also going to dip the blacks again, just to add in that little bit of contrast. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Now for color, because we set a custom white balance, I'm actually going to leave that completely as it is because I think the color is actually pretty nice. So I'm just going to up the vibrance a little bit to really help those greens and yellows pop. And then the saturation as well, just a tiny bit. Okay. Then in detail, so this is where you can sharpen your picture. So we're going to go with some masking just to make sure we're not applying that sharpening to every single pixel of the photo. We're going to change the radius to 1.5 and then I'm going to apply maybe 70 to the sharpening. We don't need any noise reduction because we haven't got any nasty graininess going on. So that is everything we're going to do in this tab. Then I'm just going to hop into the selective editing. So as you'll see here, you've got 3 different kinds of selective edits. You've got the brush selection, the radial gradient, and the linear gradient. So I'm going to go ahead and use the brush. So here you can use the brush to create and select an area. So let's head into this one. Now the middle one is the feather. So what you're going to do is you're going to paint over the area that you want to selectively edit. And it's going to go red so that you can see where you're applying your edits to. Okay, so once you've applied your mask, you can just tap on the blue diamond to get rid of the masking so that you can see what you're doing with the edit. See, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back into my lights panel and I'm going to up my shadows. And what you'll see is now that that bowl is looking a lot brighter and it's just kind of standing out a bit more in the frame. So I'm going to up the whites as well. And I'm just going to up the exposure a tiny bit as well. Okay, so I am happy with that now. So what you can do is you can go back to your brush and you can apply the same thing to every area of the photo that you want. So I'm going to do this to all 3 of the salad bowls, just so that they look consistent, they look the same as each other. And there we go. So now I'm looking at this photo and I think that there is just something missing. So I'm going to go ahead and dip the exposure just a tiny bit. And I think I might go and apply a radial filter just to see if that works. So the radial filter, if you watch my other Lightroom editing video where I've used this on the computer version of Lightroom, this is where you can just apply kind of a vignette look to your photo. So I've gone ahead and inverted this so that the edits are going to be made to the outside, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because at the moment it's kind of overlapping the salad bowls a bit too much. And then I'm going to move it around there. I'm going to come back to my lights. I'm going to down the exposure. There we go. So now I have this vignette around the edge, which is really making the salad bowls stand out of the frame a lot more. Also dip the shadows. And then if you really want to, you can go into the color panel and you can just desaturate the edges a little bit. And again, that's just going to help draw focus to the middle of the photo. Okay, so I'm done. So I'm going to click this to export. I'm going to save it to my camera roll. And I'm going to save it as maximum available because I just want the highest quality file for uploading to Instagram. So that is it. That is my top tips for shooting food photography on your phone. They're really simple tips. It's mostly about understanding what it is you're working with and then using the right apps to give you as much control as possible. If you're not subscribed already, then don't forget to hit that button. And if you want to hop in my free Manual Mode Essentials 5-day e-course, it's going to get you all up to speed on your DSLR, then hit the link down below and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.